now. Perfect.
So great, thank you. So today we are going to be talking with Judi Pettite from Biohue. And Biohue is a natural ink maker based in, Judi, are you in Placerville?
I'm in Placerville, yeah.
Yeah, Placerville, California, which is in the Gold Country. And Judy's going to go through like what she does, how she forages, mindfulness, her own art practice, which I think is going to be really super interesting to hear. We talk a lot about technique here in botanical colors because that's like what we're obsessed with, and how do we get this color, or what's the best practice for dyeing. But I don't really talk a lot about creative expression in terms of using the dyes or making inks or doing other things. So it's a real treat to be able to speak with Judi and get her perspective. I took a class from Judi, 2-3 years ago in, where was I? Marin County. And that was just really wonderful. It was a lot of fun. So we're really pleased to welcome her back. I also just wanted to say thank you again for helping keep Botanical Colors active. It's been super challenging for us, but we're getting through it, and hopefully we're supposed to hear soon whether or not we're going to be able to start safe return to work. So that's kind of something to look forward to. And just a couple of, if you're in the Seattle area, I just purchased some dye plants online from Local Color Farm and Fiber, which is in Puyallup. And she's going to be able to bring the plants up to the Seattle area in order for me to pick up at some point in the next few weeks. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's not like we don't have the seeds. I got plenty of seeds. I just haven't had the time to do my own starts. So it was kind of exciting to see that she was offering them online this morning. So if you're in our region, that's something that you could look forward to as well, getting your dye garden started. And we had a Feedback Friday last week with Melissa Moses, 2 weeks ago with Melissa Moses of Plant Workshop, and she talked about starting seeds. So you can go back to our website and check out Feedback Friday and actually look at that, that video that we did, which was the recording of the Feedback Friday, and she gives lots of really helpful information on how to get started and what to do. Okay, I think that's kind of it. I'm going to turn this over to Amy. Amy's in charge of getting all the Q&A together, and she'll actually be interfacing with Judi quite a bit and asking the questions. And so Judi, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you and to Amy. And are you muted?
Am I muted? I don't.
No, you're not. You're good.
All right.
A little bit.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're here.
Hi, everybody.
Can you guys hear me okay too?
Oh, I see nods. Okay, great. So thanks, Kathy, for talking about creativity. It's a perfect segue to kind of broach the topic of what do you do once you have these things. And my, in 2006, I made the decision to ease off using acrylics. I taught for many years. I taught people at colleges how to paint with acrylics, how to paint with oils. And for my own practice, I was growing frustrated with this notion that I was buying food from the farmer's market. I was growing my own food. Why can't I do that with my art practice? And if I did do that, what would it look like? And that's when I started in with the garden. And I began with Hopi red dye amaranth and marigolds and a lot of the things that we use today. And I researched further. I took some trips. I went to some places to look at what they were using. And with a combination of growing my own pigments and foraging, I started to come up with a palette that I could use. I also found out that process became a lot of my art practice. So at the beginning, I thought that I would come up with these kinds of paints that I could squeeze out of a tube or make little pots, and it would be that easy. But you'll find when you make your own pigments that a lot of the time is spent, a lot of the art is making your colors. So find a way to fold that in, or make some peace with that, because that's your art practice too. So let's talk about foraging first. I think foraging is an easy way to jump in, because if perhaps you're in a small space, you don't have a garden, or you've missed the season, there are colors out there that you can gather. And I just crossed the street to my neighbor's house. They have lots of birch. Birch is a really nice yellow. Fig leaves are coming in. My fig tree is starting to grow its leaves, so you can harvest those leaves. But there's a lot of things that you can do in the transition from winter into spring. Charcoal. So if you've got wood burning in the fireplace, or you have grapevines, we can talk about that later, but I've got some charcoal here that's nice to use. Earth pigments, or for a drawing practice, but here in the Sierra foothills, there's a lot of beautiful red, brown earth, and if you can quite see that. So if you haven't already, start paying attention to the dirt around you. There's a lot of color there. And lots of brown. So we've got walnuts from last year. So you can use your walnuts when they come green off the tree, or you can save them. When you save them, it's a little easier to get the hulls off, to chop those up. And our tannins, great for dyers and painters. So we've got a lot of galls. Those are fun to work with. And acorns too. Those are really nice. So when I'm taking a walk out in nature, I just keep my eyes peeled. So all my senses are alive. And I bet a lot of you do go on walks and hike and pay attention. Can be mushrooms out and about. And of course, all these tannins and things that I've pointed out. And flowers too in the spring and summer season. Does anyone have questions about gathering or cultivating for color?
Hey, Judy, somebody's asking if you go into talking about charcoal a little further.
Okay, so charcoal is great for drawing. So if you've taken an art class, you know that we use charcoal a lot in drawing. You can also grind it up. Dyers may know that when it's completely spent, the charcoal in the fireplace is a great source of wood ash. But if it's not quite and it's still black, you can use that for drawing, or you can grind it up. And this is for drawing. You can grind it up and rinse it. It's up to you whether you use a weak hydrochloric acid solution, the kind that they sell in stores or online, like a 2%. And you're going to filter out some of the impurities. You grind it a little bit further, and you can use that as a paint. And if you get it fine enough, you can use it as, you can add it to your soot ink.
Judy, I know we have like a whole bunch of questions that people sent in. Maybe we should just dive into those, and I'm sure it's going to get everybody's brains going for more questions that they do want to ask. But actually, somebody just put one up, and so might as well just answer this. But is there a rule of thumb, like what plants can be dried and which plants' pigment don't really survive the drying process and should be used fresh?
Great. Okay. Well, let's start with the birch. So birch leaves, they can be used dried or fresh. I like fig leaves fresh. Let's divide the plants up into categories. Let's talk about plants first. So we've got leaves, and we have flowers, and we have roots, and they're all going to be a little bit different. So I've mentioned 2 sets of leaves there, and then of course we have nuts and galls. Madder root can be used fresh or dried. It's good to be in the ground. I like 3 years, some people 2 to 4. So let's see. Flowers, some flowers are better fresh, some better dried. An example of this is oxalis. If you're living in California, you might see this plant. Some people call it sourgrass. It's this bright yellow little flower that pops up February, March. I like to use it fresh, and I like to use it unheated. So this is an enormous category, and I'm going to try and contain it a bit. But flower, you're going to have to experiment with what works best for you. And I will answer the questions as best I can on a case-by-case basis. Is that helpful?
I will say yes for that person.
So
no, Judy. Yes, perfect. Thanks.
All right. So a generality that flowers, I tend to either use in a solar bath or a simmer. I don't like to boil them or cook them. Leaves can be a simmer or cooked a little bit higher temperature. The woodier things, the roots and the galls and things like that, I can put them in a bucket and just let them sit and soak for months, or I can cook them up on a higher heat. They're just denser, and they need to be, the color needs to be leached out, and you can do that with a higher temperature water.
Somebody was asking, what are some of the most light, fast plant pigments that have vibrant colors?
Okay. The ones that we use with botanical color are the most light fast that I've come across. So I'm talking about weld. I like the buckthornberry. Marigold works really well. Madder root, cochineal, the browns, they have nice tannins, so all of the browns work really well. The Physolithus mushroom, the walnut, let's see, chestnut is great. Interesting thing about chestnut and the eucalyptus bark is they have a lot of resin in them, and you'll notice that they have a sheen. So if you won't notice it as much when you dye, but if you're putting it on a paper surface, you'll see that the quality of the resins show up there. And if you don't want that sheen, you can add a little bit of aluminum sulfate or aluminum acetate. And that will, same is true for marigold, that will take some of the sugars out. It'll dry it out a little bit, so it won't be as shiny, but it will change the color. Did that answer that question? Did we cover that one?
Thanks, says Leah Karansky.
Okay. Hey there.
Maybe we should jump into some of these questions. And I know we've got somebody too who's going to be talking about using your Anna Bronez is here she does many different things, Comestible Journal, but she's here just till about 10 of 1, our time, Eastern time. Okay. So we'll get her in there, but I just want to get some of these questions taken care of too. And Kathy is saying yes to everyone that I don't even know how to say that, Kathy. Physolithus. Yeah. So we get a lot of questions for Feedback Friday that all have to do with fabric. And can you use your dye inks on fabric? We get, people saying, I've used it, it all washes off, I've mordant it, I've done, why isn't it staying? So can you talk, there's probably 3 or 4 questions on our list that talk about fabrics, whether dye inks on fabric, whether it's color fast, light fast, how to get it to stay put. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, and it's a huge topic. Each color should be handled differently, and it's going to be a different answer for different kinds of fabric, your textiles. So the first thing I want to recommend is, and Kathy, you carry this book. This is,
We do,
So
yes.
if you really want to pursue this further, this is the book that you want to get. They've got some great recipes, and they, especially with indigo and the browns, they talk a lot about the Gallic browns, your oat gall browns, and your indigos. I recommend this book. So for the inks are made primarily for art applications, and by that I mean on paper applications. You can put them on fabric, and if you want to wash them, then we need to talk about recipes because you want to prepare them. So for this one on cotton, this had a milk mordant. Let's see here, this is the right way.
Like cow's milk or soy milk?
This was a cow's milk mordant. And this is with iron, those little black bits, that's an iron ink. And this is eucalyptus ink on here. And then it was rinsed in sodium carbonate solution. And then I believe it was vinegar after that. Let's see, here's a few others. This is one that I did. So these were not, this was thickened, the eucalyptus. This is, it comes out to a pink. It was thickened with guar gum. These, so I've been running some tests. They're gonna bleed. This is with indigo, walnut, and logwood with a little bit of iron. And I used a brush, so it does have that brush work there. It looks like it bled. It bled a little bit, but this was with no guar gum, just the ink on cotton, and the cotton was prepared with the cow's milk. And I tried this cow's milk recipe. I took a class with Graham Keegan, and he was using the cow's milk instead of soy milk. So I wanted to see how they worked with the cow's milk.
And is it actually just, is it fat-free milk or is it just
whole milk? It was whole. He was using
whole milk. It's interesting because when you make casein, you have to use fat-free or skim milk.
Right.
Because the fat interferes. But I guess in this process, it doesn't seem to interfere.
And he was also using it with Terra extract.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'm saying, huh.
And so this one here is with, so again, no thickeners on this, but it was prepared with the cow's milk. This is an iron ink, walnut iron, and then the other ones is, these are walnut without the iron. So you can see that.
So if you have the iron tannate reaction happening, right, it seems like that color is staying, but that if you just use cow's milk as a mordant, which I have never used before.
Right.
But you said you combine it with Tara.
Yeah. I'll send it to you. So Anna, that's what I've been working on. So I think that's a topic, and what I'll start to do is on my Instagram, kind of get more specific with the fiber applications.
Yeah, I think when we were talking yesterday, I was saying that I could see I think it was on Instagram that I saw that you were doing before and after with your washes and just kind of showing how the inks faded or didn't fade. Yeah. Hey, Judi,
I want to show just one more. This is an old school book. This is, I don't know if they still publish this, but this is Surface Design for Fabric. And that's a fun one from the 1980s. So.
It's always fun to find those books when you go searching for them. Like, it's like some strange bookseller in some strange place has it, or Amazon. So unfortunately, so I think it's always best to just find the small bookstores and support them as a side note and not do Amazon. But somebody has a question and it's in two parts. So I'm going to ask you, first part was, Heidi Iverson says, when I was using madder, the ink kept changing to black. Is there a way to stabilize that? I figured it was a paper pH issue.
Yeah. Oh, great question. Thanks, Heidi. So pH makes a huge difference, and different kinds of paper will give you different kinds of reads of your color. So play around with that. Could be a number of different things. Could be the paper, can be the brush. Brushes will also do that too. And then condition. So I don't know if anything changed with the ink. Sometimes if we dip our brushes into the ink, that can also change the pH, or also grow mold that can change the color as well. So that's an answer. Does that help at all? I have a follow-up question. Did the color change back to its original color on a different sheet of paper?
Keep muting myself and then forgetting I've muted myself. Sorry. I haven't.
I don't think we have an answer to that yet, but Judy, is there such thing as a pH neutral art paper?
So the answer to that is yes. So, all right, so this is where it gets really complicated. Art paper companies are very private about their recipes, for a lot of reasons. And mostly what you see on paper is that it's acid free.
Right.
Different things. One of the great ways to test the quality of the paper is to take cochineal ink. And I ran a class once where we had different students with different kinds of paper. And I found the best paper was coming out of France. And it was aquarelle paper. Really clean. You got a really pure, bright color. So the paper does make a huge difference.
So the paper was more neutral, because what I when they say that stuff is acid free, it typically means that the pH is moved a little bit higher. And so like for the red dyes, madder, lac, cochineal, it'll shift the color from being a red or even an orangish red all the way up to purplish, dark purple, almost black, as if you had added iron to it, because there's so much, the actual paper surface itself is alkali now because it's acid free.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I haven't worked with paper that much, so I don't know if, I know that the reason they do acid free is for archival reasons, right? Because acid is destroying the cellulose of the paper.
Right.
Yeah.
And some papers are called acid free, and they'll have formaldehyde in it. They'll have other things in
it.
Exactly, that they don't tell you. True, yes. And then back to brushes again. You want to, if you're working with a pH sensitive ink or paint, you want to check that your ferrules, those metal things that hold your brushes in, are clean and not rusting, because that will add iron to your
Right. Oh, that's a good thought. Let me just jump in. Someone is asking, what's a good toolkit to get started and to start to play?
Yay. Okay, toolkit. So, well, paper and brushes. Some people like to use pens, nibs. I recommend a glass nib, or you can try a bamboo nib. If you're using metal nibs on your pens, just note that it can shift the color as well. So keep that in mind if you're using metal. So having your paper, your brushes handy. Are you talking about getting started making your own or using them?
Let's see. We're waiting.
Okay, no problem.
This is Lana's question. Oh, she says both.
Both, okay. All right. So, and great. This, Amy, this is going to cover also the most recent question we had. So let's talk about making your own. And one of the questions that we got through email was, or online was, how many plants do you need to make your ink? Wow, great question. So think about making a dye. If you've made, a lot of us come through the natural dye channel, and what you're making is a very concentrated dye solution. So think about it in that way, a saturated solution. The more saturated your color is, the more saturated it's going to be when you get it on the paper. So if it's thin, you're going to have to either do a lot of layers to get it saturated, or you cook it down. Okay, so think about packing in lots of leaves or lots of flowers to get your color. And with leaves, it's helpful to chop them up when you're cooking. You're going to be able to extract the color better. Then whether you simmer it, how you cook it, you're going to have to explore that. Again, that's a big category. So typically, if it's kind of delicate material, you want to treat it delicately and go slow first and simmer it. If it's tougher, you can go at it a little harder with some higher heat. The other question that I had was adding, what do you do for preservative? So if I want to hold, keep some of this, this great color that I have in a jar, how do I do that? So when you cook it down, you want to strain everything out. And what I do is I go from coarser to finer. So I will have some fabric, and I will strain it through a fabric or through a sieve, and then finally get to a coffee filter. And then I want to put it into a jar that's sanitized. So think about home canning. You can put those jars into some boiling water or right out of the dishwasher, and then take your warm or hot liquid and then pour it into the jar. Oh, but before that, you can add a couple drops of clove or thyme. Some people use peppermint oil, but I've used thyme and clove with good success. And then just pour that into my jar and then seal it. Now, if you're dipping, once it's sealed, it'll keep for a very long time. It'll keep indefinitely. And because you don't have there shouldn't be any mold on it. If you do get mold, like if you've opened it up, just take the mold off and you can use it. You can also reheat it and then can it if you don't like the mold. But once you do start using it, pour some off and then use from that little dish that you've poured it off. Once you start dipping in your brush, as I mentioned, you're introducing bacteria, you're introducing other things in there, and you will start to grow mold. You don't have to keep it in the refrigerator. You can keep it in a cool area, but you may keep it in the refrigerator. Oh, last thing, date it. Always date it. Label it and date it, especially if it's going in the fridge. Label, label, label.
Hey, Judi, there's 2 questions about the thyme or cloves. One, Anya's asking, what substitute would you recommend for thyme, clove, peppermint oil as preservatives when using as ink on paper? And then Vera was saying, what does the thyme or clove do? Like, what does it do to the ink or make to the ink? I'm thinking she meant to say do to the ink.
It's a mold inhibitor. It will help inhibit the growth of bacteria or molds. And it's natural. Instead of using something like phenol or some other kind of preservative, you're using and I like the essential oils, thyme or clove. And and if you don't want to or don't have it, then see what happens without it. If you can keep the lid on tight, keep it fresh.
I wanted to pull Anna in before she has to like jump off, but Anna, can you unmute yourself, or do I have to do that?
Yep.
Oh, Anna uses Judi's inks, is like a Biohue super fan. So I just wanted, and she is an artist, and
I'm using them right now.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. You're just painting right now, aren't you? So can you talk about like how it's been for you, like your kind of journey using Biohue inks?
Yeah, I use them. I have not experimented with fabric, but I'm now gonna go buy as much cow's milk as possible and soak all of my white fabric. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I have only used it on paper. So I basically use the inks like I would use a watercolor set, is how I've been practicing with them. And I brought along, because I got a bunch of new colors, but I did kind of a swatch.
Oh, yeah.
A couple weekends ago. It's not a great swatch, but just kind of playing around with, so I have the eucalyptus, the black walnut, the mushroom, buckthorn, marigold, cochineal, indigo. And there you can kind of see, I don't know how my light is, but that's kind of like the intensity of the colors on their own. And then I was just playing around with adding layers on top, which is not really mixing, obviously, because I waited for the first layer to dry. But yeah, I just think they're really fun to experiment with. I think if you like the experimental method of watercolors, I think playing with these inks is really fun, because there's just like, especially even just mixing, like the indigo and the buckthorn are always really fun to mix on the page, I think, because you go from this like blue to bright kind of yellow chartreusey color. But yeah, when people were asking about the paper stuff, I use mine kind of only on nice watercolor paper, and I've never had any issues. So I use either Strathmore, or if I'm getting really fancy, I'll use the Arches, the French brand. But yeah, I often will, I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing this, but I will sometimes, like I usually will just get a little mason jar and put a little bit of the ink in, and that way I can dip my brush in there, dip the brush in water, kind of go back in, and I'm not, you know, putting impurities into the bottles of the ink.
Right.
But is that, I love them. They're super fun to play with. They make me, they sort of like, I automatically feel creative when I open them. So I think that I've just really enjoyed using them a lot. Yeah, and the colors, I almost always use the indigo, so, because I just love indigo, the color, but they're all great.
Thanks, Anna. I know like Anna travels around with like a little like painting kit too. I don't know if maybe, are you able to take like kind of little samples when, I know like you
Yeah,
have
I haven't.
a painting kit, but.
Yeah, that's just like my normal watercolor set. I haven't really, I've taken just like I have the older ones that have I don't think they have the dropper thing on them anymore. That's a little bit helpful if I have this when I'm just kind of out and about, because then I can drop a little tiny bit and then kind of work with it from there. But I don't usually travel with these too much. They're more of an at-home thing, but which is great for right now.
Hey, thanks, Anna. our natural dye talk show here. Yeah, well, I think would be really helpful, you're just making me think, is to get a list of things like different papers that work really well. I can get them from you, but I'm sure Judi can pass that on too. So when I email everybody with the link to today's recording, and we also have a discount we're putting up on the site today that if you buy 5 of the Biohue inks on our site, that you get 10% off. Because we have, I don't even know how many, Kathy, how many colors? Oh, she's got it all prepped up.
I'm trying not to drop these on my keyboard, which is what I normally do. I still haven't figured out the second camera thing. But yeah, it's going to look something like this if you buy 5 at a time. And I think we have 14 different inks.
Yeah, I thought we had, there's a lot.
Yeah.
They're beautiful, and you can explore, and it just
they're a lot of fun.
If you need to, I know we need a lot of like positivity right now to feel better, but I would say that the marigold is, if you just need to like put a color down on paper to bring a little joy into your day, that's the marigold.
It's a sweet color.
Perfect. Perfect.
Thanks, Anna.
Can I give a plug on a different book that I think is super interesting? It's a historical kind of nerdy book called Natural Colorants. It comes out of the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about this is that they actually show, it used to be that dyes were so precious that they would cut up scraps of fabric and dissolve the fiber. So this is wool. So like if you were making a dress or making some garment and somehow you had some fabric waste, or the garment was really old and it was no longer usable, you could actually shred up the garment, a wool garment or a silk garment, and dissolve the fabric and be left with the pigment and then reconstitute the pigment. So I just thought that was something I'd never really heard about, but apparently it was fairly common in the days when color was so precious.
Yeah, if you like nerding out on this, a lot of technical stuff. It's great. It's full of technical information. And thanks, Kathy, for bringing that up, because it reminds me what was wonderful about that time period is that art and dyeing, they were so closely linked. So you have this relationship between the dyers and the visual artists, where it started to separate as we get into the 18th and 19th century. And because they were squeezing the color out of the leftover garments, and they were taking that and making lakes out of it as well. Lakes are the pigments that have come out of a dye. So, fun book.
Kathy likes to pull out, she's got so many treasures like textiles and books and things she puts away, so, oh
This
no.
is a fun book too. This is an older one, but this is a nice journey. So if you're on lockdown and you want to feel like you're traveling, this is a nice little travel book, Victoria Finlay's, where she goes around the world in search of color and the sources of color. So that's fun too.
Hey Judy, I'm gonna jump into some more questions that have
Yeah,
come,
let's do it.
like our speed round with
Okay, let's go.
Judy. Ah!
I'm ready.
All right, can you talk a little bit about thickening the ink?
Yeah. So it depends on the application. If we're talking about fibers, there's different kinds of gums that you can use. And so depending on what you want to do with the fiber, then you're going to pick that gum. So whether it's guar gum or it's sodium alginate, cellulose gums, that's one category. If we're talking about paper, gum arabic, which is comes from Senegal mostly, from the gum acacia tree. And that's a very common binder that we use in watercolor today. So when I teach watercolor classes, that's what we're using. We're using gum arabic. You can also try dextrins. So you can use other kinds of starches as gums. If you have a peach tree or a plum tree in your yard, you might notice some sap. I have a plum tree, and you can use the sap. It's a water-soluble sap, and you can use that as a binder, as a gum for your art practice.
What about pine sap?
That needs turpentine.
Turpentine to thin it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Kramer Pigments. They're based out of Germany, but they have a shop in New York, and that used to be every time I'd go to New York, I'd make a pilgrimage to Kramer. Yeah. And it was this tiny little store. The people were super nice. They're probably not open, but they might be open for mail order right now. But they have this really lovely watercolor medium. You could buy it elsewhere as well. It's basically gum arabic, glycerin, and a tiny bit of honey. So it's just like a really sweet, I mean, literally sweet and interesting medium for watercolor. And you'll see that sometimes people will add this to their pigments or their inks, and then they'll let it dry, right? So that it turns into like a little lump of pigment that you can then easily transport around with you as like a watercolor for paper.
That's a good point. And the reason they add honey or glycerin, that's what's called a plasticizer. So that keeps and if you're making watercolor, you want to keep this in mind too, it's going to keep it soft. So if you're going to let it evaporate, as Kathy's suggesting, that glycerin and that honey is really key to doing that, because gum arabic dries very hard. And it's a little more difficult to get the color out of it once you've made that cake. So the glycerin and honey is key to that.
I think this question comes in at a good point. So Carla Meyer is asking, can you use other substances with them for effects, like how you can use salt or alcohol with silk dyes to get special effects?
Absolutely. It's going to vary depending on the color. So because these are natural colors and they have kind of their own history, their own provenance, they're going to react differently. So the best I can suggest is to experiment with them. But salts, alcohols, you might get some really fun effects with those.
You know, I haven't done it, but I just saw somebody talk about it. And if any of you have taken Cara Marie Piazza's online classes or checked out her videos, she does something that she calls salt bombing. And what I notice is she's using citric acid, which is often called sour salt. And because it's acidic, if you throw it on like a fabric, like sprinkle it, you'll get little discharge marks all over it. So that might be a real similar type of application, Carla. I don't know if it helps it spread or do anything like that, but it will definitely create some sort of texture on the fabric.
And you'll get some color shifts.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it'll lighten it radically. Yeah.
Did we talk yet about light fast? Have we talked about that at all? Kind of how light fast are the inks and your colorants, and have tests been done on any of them with sun exposure?
So I've been posting the latest color results or light fastness results on Instagram, and I'm in about another month I'll be wrapping it up, so I'll show the full the test in its full in just about a month. The colors that I'm using with botanical colors are the most light fast that I've come across. So there are plenty of really cool colors out there, but don't last very long, like your Hopi red dye amaranth. Your amaranths will fade. The pokeberry will fade as an art medium. So there are plenty out there, but I'm selecting the ones that I've found last the longest.
Lizz Leonard is asking, will the thickening help? If you thicken the dyes, will it help with light fastening? Okay.
No, it all comes back to the pigment. So that was a question that I had when I began this journey was, is there something that I can add? No, usually adding it shifts it or weakens it. So I've never found that adding something helps make the color last longer.
Judy, if you're using fabric,
Yeah.
and you mordant, do you get a better result than if you don't mordant? As long as we're not talking about an iron tannate?
Well, if you mordant, yes, you're going to get a better result. Are there colors that don't need to be mordant besides the tannins? Well, and then we talk about indigo, and that's another category unto itself. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I can't think of any examples. Are there any that you're considering, Kathy?
It just seems like all of the, if you have to mordant using this dye stuff, I would say that if you want to use the ink on fabric, it seems logical that you would have to then mordant in order to get the best result. What I'm speaking about when I say iron tannates are things like any of the wood dyes, the logwood, the chestnut, the walnut, probably those. If you add iron to the ink, right, you'll get a much blacker shade, and that seems to have quite a bit more durability on cellulose than pretty much anything. Right. And what about paper? Is it true with paper as well?
On paper, the rule of thumb is no more than a third. Keep it to a third of the quantity of the tannin. So if you're using oak galls or you're using walnut and you want to darken the ink, don't add more than a third of the weight of the walnut.
Oh, okay. So 100 grams of oak galls and 33 grams of iron max.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it will weaken the paper. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
The iron will start to eat away. Yeah. Same with canvas. When they were creating paintings, so when the scientists go back and look at the paintings of old, they can see where the iron has begun to eat through the canvas or through the wood.
Judi, somebody is asking what that beautiful coralish color is behind you.
Oh, this one. Hi, Petra. This is cochineal and buckthorn
Wow.
on watercolor paper. And this is from last year. So this is from February of 2019. And it's been hanging up in my studio. So it's really kept its color.
Judi, are you going to give us too, like some of the best papers to use, and I can get that from you and just share out with everybody, like whatever that kind of paper was that you had. I see there's like 2 different types of paper that you're using.
Well, this is what I've got here. I buy this in large packs. This is a Strathmore 5x7, and I use this in my workshops, and that's why I have a lot. And it's nice to create. Now I have all these samples, you know, that I hang up in my studio. So I tend to use Strathmore because I find it's consistent while also being cost effective. But I do appreciate Arches. And a lot of the French papers are my favorite. So the Arches Aquarelle, I like those papers.
Okay. Jean Brennan is asking, can you talk about your use of beeswax or soy wax with your paints, and when you use them, what you achieve with wax additions?
So what the wax will do, so I have a little bit of wax. Here's a canvas. This is from a number of years ago. I did this. It was on linen, butter linen, and that was with a water-based ink on it, and then I rubbed on a coat of beeswax on top. So you can use what the beeswax or the soy wax is going to do is it's going to give you a protective film over your water-soluble inks. Better on canvas, not on paper, because it will stain it. So on your canvas, on your wood, I especially love the beeswax or soy wax on wood. And I introduced soy wax because I have a friend who's vegan and didn't want to use beeswax. So I really like the Dorland's wax medium. If you've been in an art store and you've seen that kind of little translucent jar of wax, and you can use it, it's cold wax, and you can incorporate it into your oil paints. Or on top of your water-based paints, and it will smear and spread really nicely. Well, I wanted to make my own without petroleum distillates in it. So I did that by getting the white beeswax, and then I pour some spike oil in it and let it sit overnight, and then it gets nice and soft, and I can use it just like a cold wax medium. I can also do the same with the soy wax. Soy wax is a little bit harder, so I melt it do a double boiler situation, and then I put some of the spike oil in it. Some people don't like the scent of spike oil, the steam distilled lavender, because it really is pungent. You can use turpentine, which comes from a pine tree, but it is irritating to some people's lungs. So you want to use all of these in a very well ventilated area. Same is true if you're making your own inks at home, well ventilated. I find that the walnut is especially irritating, and some of the smells can be cloying. So while you think it's natural and it's fine to cook on the kitchen stove, it's best if you can cook it in the garage, in the studio, or somewhere outdoors.
We have such random questions. I don't even know how to segue in.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, and we have 5 minutes.
Okay.
But so Ola is saying, I have a question about the milk. Can it be store-bought milk? I read once it needs to be straight from the farmer.
We used to store-bought milk, and since then I used to store-bought milk. Yeah.
Okay. Heidi Iverson's asking, if you protect the art with UV glass, does that help?
It does help, absolutely. And so protecting your artwork, and I say this about any kind of artwork, whether it's with synthetic pigments or natural, keep it out of direct sunlight if possible. UV glass is great. You just don't want it to sit outside on the porch in the full sun, any kind of artwork. So just keep it protected as you would. And if you can put UV glass on it, that's great. And choose the right pigments. Choose pigments that you know to be more light fast than those that are less, or it will fade.
Judy, one of the questions that we had on our sheet, I was just looking over what maybe you haven't answered. I thought was so interesting, and I remember so this person had asked about can you use it on wood as a natural color finish? And this person has tried it in the past, but obviously some pieces are just too large and with a small bottle. So can you talk at all about, can you use it on wood?
You can use it on wood. So if it's natural wood, you just want to make sure that there's that it's able to receive the color. So sand it down lightly, and then you can paint it right on. And on my Instagram again, I believe I have some samples with eucalyptus, with walnut, and indigo, and those are my favorites for covering wood. So you're going to get a stain that's kind of a transparent stain on there, and then afterwards you can leave it as is, but I like to protect the wood, so you can go over it then with some beeswax or soy wax or oil, whatever, however you like to finish your furniture. But you absolutely can, and I recommend it.
Excellent.
Oh, can I add one more thing to that? You can, so if you don't want it to be translucent, if you want it to be, if you want it to be more opaque, you can add some chalk in there. Or calcium carbonate. You can add some different things to increase the opacity of your color on the furniture.
Well, I've been peeking on people as they've been, as you were talking, just scrolling. I can see Breeze Honeycutt laughing right now, but everybody's been writing furiously and looks like taking some serious notes at home. So that's been fun to see. But I don't know, Kathy, did you have something you wanted to say to kind of?
There's just one other question from Petra. It says, what part of the chestnut are you using?
Oh, thanks.
Bark, leaves, or the actual nuts? So who was it? I just read that the outer, that green spiky thing, that the husk of the chestnut is really great. I think it was in the new Sasha book.
Oh,
I just saw it like this morning as I was drinking coffee. So if you can harvest the bark from a fallen tree, you definitely can get color from there. And then the actual wood itself has color. I'm sure the leaves have color. You probably would get different color from every single part if you kept them separate and distilled them separately. So, and then the husk as well. So there's a lot of color in that.
Yeah, there's a lot of color in the woods, but yes, absolutely.
Oh, the Sasha book. This is brand new.
It'll be on our site too, Kathy, remember.
Great.
Oh yeah, we ordered some. It's really fascinating. Basically, Sasha has like wandered the earth, and she's creating, like she takes a plant and she'll dye it on, she must be dyeing it on wool. So it's on wool gauze, I think, and it's by itself with alum and iron, and then with iron. So it goes like this: by itself, alum and iron, and then iron. It's very cool. It's called Natural Palettes: Inspiration from Plant-Based Color. I'm reading it backwards because it's showing as reverse.
I took a class with Sasha, and she uses like this. Dharma Trading has these wool gauzy scarf blanks.
Yeah.
And they just ate up that color. It was so much fun to use it, but I think that's what she's using. It looks like in the book too.
It looks like it's wool, because that's where you would be able to do a lot of dyeing with no mordant and get a nice color. Mm-hmm. So yeah, check that out.
All right, well.
Someone else have a question?
What Sasha book is that? Alexandra saying,
can I buy any of these colors in Europe?
Yeah, the husk stains your fingers immediately.
Yeah, we can ship to Europe. We haven't had, for things like inks, it's not so much of a problem. What we have a problem shipping internationally are sometimes raw dyestuffs and seeds. So we don't ship those, but inks or anything that's prepared or processed are typically fine.
I almost just said something so wise guyish, but I'm going to hold it in.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
Great.
someone asked me if I'd mentioned a while ago that I was writing a book, and I still am. It's becoming a larger endeavor than I anticipated. So it's coming.
Good.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to that.
Thanks. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Judi. Thanks for being part of this today. And I know there were lots of questions, but I'm sure you got everybody wanting to try out dye inks and just kind of exploring color in a different way.
Okay.
It's been interesting. Yeah, yep.
I mention one last thing. So the difference between dye and pigment ink is you start with the pigment and then reconstitute it, make it into an ink, and the dye base is where you're starting from a dye and then you're making it into an ink. So the indigo is, of the set, the indigo is the one that comes from the extract, and it's actually ground into kind of a concentrated paint and then water added. So that was the question some people had.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, Kathy, can I just unmute everybody so everybody can just say hi and some one big universal collective?
Absolutely.
Hey, let's do it.
Hello, everyone.
Unmuted.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi.
Bye.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
It was really fun to see everybody. Thanks, guys. All right, we'll see you next week. Oh, Amy, before you all sign off, Amy, tell them who's coming next week.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
This is on our natural dye talk. So next week, I don't know. How
Earth
many of you are
Week,
prepared.
Earth Day.
Fashion Revolution Day is next Friday. If anybody knows what Fashion Revolution Day is,
Okay, I'll be back.
hopefully. But Ursula de Castro, who was the founder of Fashion Revolution Day, will be joining us, and will be giving us kind of an overview of what happened on that anniversary 7 years later, or 7 years ago. And so we'll go from Ursula, and then we're going to go right into Katrina Rodabaugh talking about mending and her sashiko stitching, and using natural dyes as a way to create and kind of get through this time. So it's going to be a really great.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. And, we have only 100 spots, and then Zoom just shuts it down. So like I was saying when I emailed you, but we had to turn away about 50 people last week. So just have to quickly sign up for this one for next week.
Can we sign up today?
Yeah.
It's on the site right now. It's on our blog.
Okay.
Yeah, you can sign up now.
Cool.
Yes.
Sign up now for.
Yeah, and we'll have Judy's inks starting today. Like I said, we'll have 10% off, and you'll see the discount at checkout. So if you get 5 Biohue inks, or more, you'll get the discount. And there's tons of beautiful colors.
Yeah, and if you
All
have
right.
questions,
Thank you.
You guys are awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Katana.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Breeze.
Bye, Kathy. Bye, Amy. Wait, random question.
Yes.
Does anyone know if the Natural Dye Conference is going to get rescheduled, or has nobody heard anything?
The Toronto one?
Yeah.
Next year.
Yeah.
Ah,
That's
damn.
what they're saying. Next year.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Well-
Is Judy there? Could she just tell me the author's name of the natural colorants book?
oh yeah.
Joe Kirby.
Joe Kirby. Okay, thank you.
J.O. Kirby. I wrote it in the chat. There's 3 authors.
And
Okay, my phone died at that point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and the publisher is Archetype. Archetype out of the UK.
Archetype. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, you guys? All right, I'm going to pause and stop the recording.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.